Well, there's certainly plenty to learn from last week's game. I think the biggest thing is what we're capable of when we do things correctly, and what can happen when you don't. And I think the intensity of the game overwhelmed us a little bit early in the game, kind of counterpunched our way back into it. But it's an unbelievable job of overcoming a lot of adversity, which is something that some teams may or may not be able to do. But I think it's a real credit to the competitive character of our team and the situation that they were in, the circumstances that they were playing in. But I think all these things are opportunities to learn from. The biggest one being you better bring your A game every time you play in this league, regardless of where you're playing. There's a lot of good football players, there's a lot of good football teams, and we certainly need to be ready to play and hitting on all cylinders every time we play. We had some outstanding performances, Barrett Jones, Mark Ingram, Preston Dow on offense. Defensively, Mark Barron and Robert Lester. Robert had the big plays and was SEC Player of the Week, and Trent Richardson, Jeremy Shelley, and Julio Jones did a really good job on special teams. I know you've got those names. Marcel is making good progress. Only real significant injury. You got some other guys with some bumps, but he's just going to move around a little bit today, see if he can practice tomorrow. I think he'll be back Wednesday for sure. Florida is an outstanding team. They probably have a record of dominance more than any team in our league over what they've done in the last few years under Urban Meyer, who's an outstanding coach and does a great job with them. And they got a lot of team speed. They got good players at all the skill positions. They have a good offensive line. Defensively, they're very active, run well, a lot of team speed, and they play outstanding on special teams. So this is as good all-around team as we played all year, and certainly have improved, each week that they played this year with a new quarterback, and also with a new guy coming in at quarterback, who really plays tight end, number 8, Trey Burton, but and he's done some of the quarterback run stuff that Tebow used to do. So this will be a very challenging game for us, very challenging preparation relative to what they do, but certainly the kind of game that our players should be looking forward to.
Coach, you touched on it in your opening statements. I remember last year, I think it was after the Tennessee game, you really talked about how sometimes you learn more from adversity than you do from success. And I just wondered how proud you were of your football team for fighting back, and if you could expound on particularly what you learned from the adversity within that game.
Well, I think that it's really kind of, you hope that people can learn lessons and not have to go through horrible experiences to do it. Everybody's sort of willing to change when something bad happens. A lot of people aren't willing to change when good things are happening. Hopefully we'll have the maturity to be able to learn from the adversity that we had to overcome, some of which we created ourselves, some of which they created with their ability to make plays. But at the same time, we got to know that getting it right, doing things right, having a sense of urgency about doing things the right way is what's going to help us become a better team, individually and collectively. And I think a lot of our players need to learn that based on the experience that they just had. Now, I'm very proud of the team for keeping their poise and having the composure to come back in the game and keep grinding and executing and making plays. And some guys who had bad plays, came back and made very good plays in the game. And made plays when it counted, and I think that's a real key for us. But I think what we want to learn is that we need to do that all the time.
Coach Saban, just following up on Burton and his ability to sort of give them a Tebow type package. First of all, how different is it from when you use Mark or Trent in the Wildcat? And second of all, is it almost two different offenses you have to prepare for this week?
Not necessarily. I think it would be a combination of what they did last year. But this guy can throw the ball. He has thrown the ball, so it's not a running back just playing, quarterback. And, he's a good football player when it comes to playing tight end, too, and being a pretty good receiver for him. And all of his scores did not come playing quarterback. He did it both ways. Guy's a very good player. It does create some problems, but, it creates more problems when you got one guy who can do it all, because you really can't, you have to defend it all the time. And, this guy's a very good player, and, Brantley's a very good passer. So the combination of those two guys do present some issues and problems.
Florida's been plagued with some off-the-field problems, arresting the like the last few years. It's been relatively peace and quiet here the last few years. So what's the secret to keeping players out of trouble, and how much of that traces back to recruiting?
Well, I think everybody has a responsibility to, represent themselves, their family, the institution that they represent, in a first-class way, and that's what we try to sell to our players. We try to do some educational programs, whether it's peer group intervention or success-oriented type education that lets players know what's going to help them be successful. And I'm sure that every program, tries to do that to some degree. I'm sure they've tried to do that at the University of Florida. And I know the people that they have there and the coaches that they have there and what they want and the expectation that they have for the standard of behavior that we're all trying to achieve in college football. And we'll continue to do the things that we've always done to try to help our players make good choices and decisions so that they have the best opportunity to take advantage of their gifts.
We often see law enforcement officers here observing practice. So what's the purpose for inviting them?
Well, I think that what we try to do with our players is we have meetings, with the law enforcement officials, in this community. We want our players to understand that, police provide a great service, in our community, and it's something that they should respect, understand, and know about, and develop relationships with it. Police are there to help you, and I think we've done a good job of that and have a pretty good relationship with those people, and our players do respect that. And I think having the guys around some probably helps enhance that a little bit.
Coach, can you comment on the performance of Barrett Jones this year, as well as his off-the-field involvement with community service and academics?
Well, Barrett Jones is one of the finest people that I've ever had the opportunity to be around in terms of, his willingness to help others, his involvement in the community, going to a foreign country to help, with, difficult circumstances, very giving, and it's really, I use the term, do you want to be blessed or do you want to be a blessing? And I think this guy is a blessing in a lot of ways. He's an outstanding football player, and has done a really good job for us all last year and this year. Smart, and helps the other players with his leadership play better as well. So this is really a fine young man who's going to be very successful at whatever he chooses to do, and he's been very successful here as a student athlete and as a football player.